All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Carice Tarbett, and I am the Learning Experience Manager for Pet Partners Therapy Animal Program. So I also manage the Animal Assisted Crisis Response Program as well, and I coordinate all of the AACR deployments that we have. This is kind of a heavy topic to discuss during what is definitely a very challenging time, I think, for us. So I just want to take a moment before we dive in, do a little temperature check and see how everyone is feeling today on this beautiful Thursday, at least in Seattle. So if you're listening, can you type in a word that describes your day so far? Go ahead and type it into the chat. All right. I'm ready. All right, well, hopefully, oh, thank you. Oh, rewarding and interesting. Hi. Oh, very nice to see you. I'm glad that some of you are happy and calm. I'm also feeling very calm today, which is kind of crazy. I haven't felt this way in a while. So it looks like a lot of people are joining us and you're having a good day so far. So I hope we can make it even better over the next, 30 to 60 minutes. Oh, my day is a little long too. I'm sorry, Nancy. I'd love to hear what some of you in the audience would like to learn about during this live. So like I said, we're going to be talking about the Animal Assisted Crisis Response Program at Pet Partners. So just let me know what types of things you'd like to talk about, and I'll see if we can address some of those. And while I'm waiting, I'll just call out that the dog on screen with me is named Rhett. He is an Animal Assisted Crisis Response Therapy team member in Colorado, and this is from a deployment that him and his owner Terry went on in March, April, maybe. Okay. So how to get the training requirements, absolutely, we'll definitely talk about that. What to expect on a deployment is definitely something that we'll talk about. I have someone who's going to come on and talk about their own experiences on deployments as well. Training for the humans, absolutely. That's what we do best. Oh, your training expires in July. We can talk about that. Okay, great. Sure. So how to get connected. All right. So a lot of you are mentioning you want to know how to get the credential. I'll definitely get to that too. So, okay. Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about the training. So a little bit of background about the program. So AACR, the Animal Assisted Crisis Response Program, is a form of animal assisted activities, and it's meant to provide comfort to people who have been affected by natural or human caused or technological disasters. And AACR is not a professional mental health intervention. AACR teams are not first responders. They are still volunteers. And Pet Partners we take a neighbors helping neighbors approach to minimize the need for volunteers to drive long distances with their animals. It also helps keep outsiders from taking community resources during a disaster. So, for example, if a coastal city has displaced citizens after a hurricane, we want to ensure that the hotel rooms are being used for the families or the displaced people in that community. So we want to make sure that any deployment that we have is done locally with local teams. So that's why it's so important for you to sign up to be an AACR team within your local community. Oh yes, Penny the pig. Yes, hi Mary. So I do want to say that, as the manager of this program, I never want to call on anyone to deploy. I'm from Broward County, Florida, which is the home of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And I can tell you firsthand that no one ever thinks that a tragedy is going to impact their community until it does. And it's really important to just be prepared. So Pet Partners launched this program in October 2019. So just, not too long ago, not quite a year old yet. And in the years leading up to that program, we saw some of our therapy animal teams were already doing these sorts of visits And some of them did them with other organizations, but a lot of them did them without any additional training and without any real support. So we have a commitment at Pet Partners to education for handlers and to animal welfare. So we thought it would be really important to create an educational offering or training, if you will, that was aligned with our philosophy around animal welfare. And we recognize that other organizations also don't necessarily accept non-canine species for AACR work. And we know that people can benefit from all sorts of animals. So we are species inclusive, and we do register all 9 of the species for AACR work. So we have dogs, cats, birds, pigs, horses, mini horses, llamas, alpacas, guinea pigs, rats, and rabbits. So that's our 9 species. And I think we have a couple of them covered. We do provide training for people who are living outside of the US. You can get in touch with me and we can talk about that. We don't provide the credential outside of the US at this point, but you are certainly welcome to have the training available. Ooh, oh, your guinea pigs took it. That's great news. I didn't know that we had any guinea pigs quite yet. Yay. So we do currently, like I said, the program launched in October 2019. And we currently have around 500 teams. I think we're just about to hit that 500 team threshold. So a good percentage of our teams, we're always looking for more. Like I said, we only deploy people locally. So the more teams we have locally, the bigger of a response that we can potentially make if and when something happens. The types of deployments. So AACR teams deploy to schools and universities, businesses, memorial events. If there's the anniversary of someone's passing or the anniversary of a difficult event, we might deploy to that. We currently have several deployments that are ongoing to hospitals to support medical staff who are, seeing the impacts of the pandemic, not interacting with patients at all, just being there to provide a little bit of emotional support and relief to the medical first responders and doctors and nurses. We also have a lot of teams that go to areas impacted by natural disasters. So after the tornadoes in Tennessee, we had some teams, wildfires in California. I know there's some in Arizona. I don't know that we're doing any deployments just yet for those, but we do have some relationships with organizations that allow us to do more deployments after natural disasters. So to be a team, to become AACR credentialed, you do need to be registered with Pet Partners for 6 months. So once you've been registered for 6 months, you can go into your registration and there'll be a little pink link that says become an AACR team. And that'll take you into it. So after the 6-month mark, you're eligible for it. And you don't need to have a background in emergency response to join. Lots of people have just, wanted to do a little bit more. Also, I personally like the training a lot. I helped with it, and I think that it's a really valuable resource. Let's see, let me take a couple of these questions. Okay, great. All right, let me talk about the training structure. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about what the training actually entails. So it is an online course. It really emphasizes active listening skills and de-escalation techniques and, working with victims to help ground them. And the training was designed with input from subject matter experts with the goal of taking animal handling like sort of to the next level. So we want to build on that knowledge that you already have in a way that engages more critical thinking and problem solving skills, so that in the moment when you're dealing with an emotionally charged situation, you have some tools in your toolbox to prepare you for how to interact with those people, because it is a very different atmosphere when you're on an AACR deployment than on a typical therapy animal visit. So all the learning in the training is contextual. There's a series of scenarios that you might experience as an AACR team. There's one around a school shooting and meeting with students who are returning to school for the first time, meeting with a sexual assault victim, and then talking with first responders. These are situations that AACR teams might likely encounter. And one of the benefits of this style of training is that the handlers can really think through these situations and scenarios and see whether they're a good fit. I've had several people who have, started the training and then contacted me and said, you know what, I got into this and I realized, like, I don't know if my animal and I should be in this situation, or I don't know if this is really the right role for me. So, and I completely appreciate and honor that they are able to see, like, this is, a step beyond what I really want to do as a volunteer. And then I've also had people, I had someone contact me recently who said that they had taken the training, and during it, one of the units in particular that talked about gun violence was a little bit triggering for them. And they said, we continued with the training, and, I just know from taking that course now that if there's ever a deployment that's related to gun violence, that I personally can't do it, that I can do other types of deployment, but the training really has helped me to think through the types of scenarios that I would be comfortable attending and the ones that I think might be too difficult and should be off the table for my team. Oh, thank you, Deb. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I am biased, of course, but I think it's a really great course as well. So unfortunately, you can't take the training. The way that it's set up in our computer system is you have to be registered and active for 6 months before you can access it. And that's by design. We want to make sure that the teams have some experience. The training is online, and there's no in-person training component. There's no second evaluation that's needed, and it's tied to your registration. So once you have that credential, every time you renew your team registration, you're also going to renew that credential as well. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think at this point, I'd like to bring in a team. This is a wonderful woman. Her name is Sandy Dubin. I'll let her speak more about herself, but she is an AACR handler with her wonderful dog, Duchess, and she's going to share some information about what it's like to actually go on a deployment. So Sandy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Carice. Hi, everybody. So I have been with Pet Partners since about 1999. I've had several dogs go in the program, about 8 or 9 of them through the years, and also a guinea pig. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to become an evaluator and an instructor because being very passionate about it, I wanted to share my knowledge and help out with that and help educate people. And so the reason I'm here talking is I decided as soon as the AACR came up with Pet Partners, it's something I've wanted to do a long time ago. And at this point, I have 2 therapy dogs, Duchess, who's a 2-year-old Black Russian Terrier, about 100 pounds. And I have a bearded collie, Reese, who's 4 years old. And I have another dog that's retired. And I felt that both of my dogs were very appropriate for crisis type situations. And in the past, I have done a couple of events. One was the Las Vegas Route 91 event that we had. I'm from Southern California. I live in Santa Clarita. And we had a lot of people from Santa Clarita that were at the Las Vegas event. So we had an event for them here. And also I've done a few fire personnel where we've had big fires here in Southern California, and we've traveled to the base camp and helped out the firefighters who are away from their family for a few weeks. So I'm kind of answering some of Carice's questions she was going to ask me anyway. So
would you say that your that attending the vigil for Las Vegas is one of the things that motivated you to do the AACR credential?
I actually wanted to do this 20 years ago. So I wouldn't say that was the event that wanted me to do the AACR. I was interested many, many years ago, but I didn't do it back then because for a few reasons. But taking the AACR training helped. I feel like even though I didn't have that training when I did the Las Vegas event, I think we handled it pretty well anyway, looking back. So let's see, why don't we bring up, the reason I'm here also is because last November here in our community, hope I don't get too emotional, we had a school shooting at a high school called Saugus High School. A student right before school brought a gun to school and shot several kids and then turned the gun on himself. And so 3 people as a result passed away and 3 people were hit and survived. And this is a picture of my Black Russian Duchess in front of the high school. So my very first response when I heard about the shooting was, we have in Santa Clarita a lot of pet partners, really great teams. And a lot of us volunteer at our community hospital. And my first thought was, we better start going to the hospital because that's probably where some of these people are going to be. My second thought was, I better contact the hospital and make sure it's okay. So that's one point, that don't go and deploy yourself without first checking. So I think that's really important, because I'm glad I didn't start telling people just to show up. I did talk to our volunteer coordinator at our hospital, and she said, it's too chaotic. We need you guys to just sit tight for a while. So that's how that went down that day.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit, and we'll talk later about, you know, the reasons why we don't allow self-deployment and how that can get a little bit tricky with people. So when you first went, and I want to pause for a moment because we had a couple questions about, you know, how do you do a deployment? How does a deployment happen? So usually someone will contact Pet Partners and it'll come to me. And I will speak with the coordinator that's on site at the facility to get some logistical information and get clearance for our teams to go. Once we have that, I send an invitation out to the teams that are local to that area. Usually, you know, depending on the area, geographically, it's usually about an hour's drive. So if you live within about an hour's drive of an incident, I'll probably reach out. So I had reached out to Sandy and said, you know, we had this request from Saugus High School, from the administration there, to have teams go. Would you be willing to go? Because she was registered. And that's usually the way that it begins. And then, you know, they vary. Sometimes they're just one-off events for one day. And sometimes, like with Saugus High School, as we'll talk about, you know, it was ongoing for many, many days and for weeks and months after that. As those tend to happen when there's mass shootings, we have longer deployments, but sometimes they're just one-off events. And, you know, sometimes there's one team that goes and sometimes they want as many as possible. But, you know, as Sandy said earlier, when these happen, you know, most people don't have experience with this. It's the first time it's happened to them. And, you know, you never want it to happen to you or to your family or to your community. And when it does, I think that there's a little bit of reassurance to be able to say, I know what to do. That, you know, we have this training, that I have the infrastructure in place at Pet Partners to be able to help and to help coordinate those things. And, you know, every person I talk to when something terrible has happened, they don't know what to do because it's the first time they're experiencing it a lot of times. So it's nice for us to be able to have that background to say, we know what to do. Here's how we can help you. And just to help kind of, you know, at a level of calm that maybe those people haven't felt for, you know, some amount of time. So Sandy, can you speak a little bit, like as an animal handler, what is your role in the visit? So when you go on the visit, what is your role as the handler?
Okay. Let's see. We're skipping around a little bit here. Do you mind if we go back to how it's different?
Sure.
How AACR is a little different than a normal visit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be, yeah.
Okay.
We can talk about that.
Because I have notes, and then
Okay.
this will keep me better on track. And
Sure.
what I wanted to say about the school shooting too is that here in Santa Clarita, we are known for having a lot of law enforcement that live here. And we felt very like it's a safe community. And I'm sure many other cities across the United States, when they have school shootings, feel the same way, that, boy, this is such a safe community that it really jars you. And like Carice was saying, not even though the shooting happened at one high school, it affected our whole community because the first responders were affected, all the families of all the kids were affected. Most of the schools here were on lockdown because they didn't know what was going on at first to be safe. And we did deploy not just to Saugus High School, but to every other high school out here, which is several, and junior highs. So we were kept very busy. We have a lot of teams. Yeah, like every other street out here has law enforcement that lives here. There was law enforcement on campus, the whole bit. So I kind of, you reminded me of that. Talking about how it differs with respect to other therapy activities is I found that, especially with a school shooting, that what you say or don't say is way more important, because a lot of the kids told their parents that they love the therapy dogs because the dogs don't ask them how they're doing. And they were very kind of fed up with having their parents or the staff saying, "How are you doing today? How are you doing?" And they love just being with the dog and not having to talk. And our dogs feel when the kids needed them and would even approach the kids. And so here is one of our many teams here in Santa Clarita. This is Leela Muirhead with Lil Bit. And Lil Bit's a cute little Shih Tzu poodle. And we had such great response from not just the kids, but parents saying, "Hey, we need some love from the dogs too." They saw what a great thing it was for all their kids at the schools. And so Leela, she reached out and personally went and met a family outside of the school setting. And I thought that was just really, really special. So that's Leela with Lil Bit. And another way, so talking about how it's different, your listening skills, and you learn this in the AACR. It's really nice when you take the online, because they go over what is appropriate to say. And in a school shooting situation, sometimes you don't have to say anything, and it's the best thing. There was a lot of times where I felt very connected with some of the kids, and I didn't even ask their names because that wasn't important. And even that seemed like a little too much. They just wanted their space. They just wanted to hold the dog, especially when I went there before it opened, and kids and staff went back to the school to grab their bags, their backpacks that they had to, run that day. Yeah. And so the staff came over and kids came over, and there were no words. They just were holding on to the dogs. And the other thing that I'll talk a little bit more about later is the PTSD that happens in something like a school shooting. That was that kind of woke me up to some things, and how important it is to make sure that your dog is okay for this type of deployment.
Yeah, that's really paramount to our program in general, but especially when you're considering joining AACR. I have a couple of people that I saw in the chat that asked, like, I had one dog. What if I wanted to get another dog credentialed with this? And I would say, I think it really comes down to each animal. Like a small animal can do this, and there's different types of deployments, but not every animal is going to be fit for this type of environment. And certainly not every handler is either. That's why it's an additional credential that you add on to your regular volunteerism, because it's not appropriate for all animals, and not all animals are going to want to be the center of attention in such like an emotionally charged situation. Certainly, not just dogs, any animal really. Yeah. Hi, Layla, I see you, by the way.
Could we go to? I guess let's see the picture of Duchess hugging the boy. It kind of gives you an idea of some of the emotion. This was at Saugus at the multi-purpose room, and this is where kids came who they couldn't be in class. They needed something more, or couldn't concentrate, or for whatever reason. And so for weeks, sometimes they'd have us in the quad, or sometimes they'd have us in this multi-purpose room. And I love this picture because this boy was sitting in a beanbag, and even though my dog is very big, she just went into his arms and hugged him for a long time. So it's a pretty sweet picture, and kind of shows some of the emotion there. And then can we see the picture now of the Bowman? And so before Saugus came back open, some of the other schools were open. So we were, Carice and I were talking about, how was it your first day on the job? Basically, were you nervous? Yeah. And my answer to that question was, it wasn't so much nerves as very emotional. My daughter hasn't been in school for many years, but Bowman is another high school in Santa Clarita, and that was basically the first deployment that I went to before Saugus opened back up. I took my dog Reese there, and driving there that day, I got very emotional. I put myself into the mind of all these parents who were taking their kids back to school after a school shooting. I think it was a couple weeks later, 2 to 3 weeks later, something. And I thought, oh my God, I would have been so nervous. And so I wasn't nervous, but I was very emotional, and I was kind of surprised because I thought, well, I wasn't as affected. My daughter's not in school, but it still affected us. And going to this high school was wonderful. They had many counselors there, and to show me also that it wasn't just one school that was affected. There was a teacher I saw just crying because she was saying that she has young kids. So it really affected our whole community. And about 10 days after the shooting, I got together about 30 different teams together, and we went to the park. Since it was such a big thing that the whole community was interested in the pet therapy, not just the kids, I decided, hey, let's go to the park that's there and have teams, and anybody in the community can come. And it was a really wonderful event that we had out there in Santa Clarita.
Yeah, and, I know in Broward County, after the shooting at that school, there was many, many memorial events throughout the community. It's just, it really does impact everyone. And that's why when we're looking at having teams join, we really want you to think about it as something that you would do locally within your own communities, that we're not going to send you several hours away. We're not going to have you up in a hotel somewhere in another state. We really want you to be doing the work on the ground with the people that that the people that are around you in your community that you see at the grocery store or at the school, or, the people at your church.
Yeah. Speaking of that, can we show the picture of John and Moses? we in Santa Clarita have a lot, we have one of our teams is a retired principal, that's Mary. We also have a lot of retired healthcare workers and teachers. And this is John with his wonderful Labrador, Moses. And he was a teacher at the junior high that led into Saugus High School. So a lot of the kids knew him. And he was such a wonderful volunteer for really attending many of the schools, not just Saugus and the junior high, but he was such a trooper, and people still, they knew him, and it was really great. And I wish I could give a shout out to everybody in Santa Clarita because we have such great teams. But
me too.
John with Moses. Yeah. And
it really is, being part of an AACR deployment, for as heavy as it is, does give you a sense of community. It gives you a sense of giving back at a time when, there's such a need. But I feel like, I keep saying I'm just so biased because I run the program, but I know the impact. I've seen it firsthand that, if you're interested in it, if you're thinking about doing it, please reach out, please consider doing it. We have on the website, we have a page about AACR. We have an orientation manual that you can access to learn more about it and read about it. If you get through the training and you realize that it's not for you, that's okay. You still have that training, and a lot of it is around psychological first aid concepts and active listening skills. So those are, we can all learn to be better listeners. I think there's nothing wrong with taking that training. It's going to add to you. I'm, former teacher, so the more education, the better, I always think.
Yeah.
But Sandy, I want to ask you, is there any advice that you would share with someone that's interested in becoming an AACR team? What advice would you have for them?
I think the first thing is look at your animal. Do you think that they're appropriate? They can handle the stress. Can you handle the stress? I think that's the main thing. Is that and be prepared. Take it. We had a lot of people that, when the shooting happened, they were not AACR registered, but as soon as it happened, it only took a day to go online and take it. So, even if you're not prepared, it's not too time consuming. And
yeah, I would say
I do want to give a shout out to, we have someone here in Santa Clarita named Pam, who she set up the Sign Up Genius. I don't know if anyone's asked about like the technicalities. I'm not the best computer person, so she was great. She took that by the reins so that people could sign up different days, and or else it would have been a lot harder because there's so many schools, and 2 to 3 times a day the schools wanted somebody there. So thank you, Pam.
So, and to be clear, we do, if you're an AACR team, you still must adhere to the 2-hour policy. So you can only visit for 2 hours total each day. With some of the deployments, they want people in mornings or lunchtime or afternoon or evening. Like there could be multiple deployment shifts during a day, which is what Sandy's talking about. So having, for larger deployments like that, I'll send out a sign-up sheet with different slots, time slots that people can join. And yes, you still have to adhere to the grooming requirements, especially, you want to make sure that your animal is clean and that you are healthy and that you're, ready for a deployment. Most of the ones that we're doing right now are around healthcare facilities. So you definitely want to adhere to all the grooming and safety protocols that Pet Partners has.
I would say one other thing about people who are interested is you're going to be taking direction from somebody else. Usually it might not even be a Pet Partner person. It might be somebody at the facility. So don't get your feelings hurt if you show up and they want you someplace else, or, to do something that you weren't expecting. So be flexible, and also maybe be prepared by having a checklist of things to bring, your trading cards. I mean, I must have given out thousands of trading cards and, water, your ID, that kind of stuff, just to, be prepared. And if you're a little nervous at first, contact someone with Pet Partners and say, I'm a little nervous. Is there something that, I need to think about before I go? So there's a lot of support out there for everybody.
Yeah, and before anyone deploys, I'll send a follow-up email with all the logistical information, the contact for the person on site. I think for Saugus, I had maps of the school so that you knew where to go, where to park. After especially after a nationally televised event, something that hits the national news in general, there's a lot of people that want to come, whether they're spectators or whether they're, really they have good intentions, but you want to make sure that you're following all of the policies and procedures that they have in place, because they're going to be especially guarded at any facility that you go to that has an AACR deployment. So I try to be really clear with all of the directions when I send out the logistics for the deployments. And I do see Kathleen and Rich, I see your questions about the wildfires in Tucson, and I don't, I'll follow up with you maybe tomorrow or with the chapter office about them. But I don't have a deployment as of yet. And I think the situation is still pretty ongoing. We try to make sure that AACR deployments don't happen during an active scene, but more during the recovery period. So once there's no immediate threat of danger, we don't want our teams to be going in as first responders. And I think at this point in Tucson, the fires are still quite out of control, if I understand correctly. Also, stay safe, you two.
I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want me to answer your last question that you had for me. And
I was just going to ask you.
Okay. Yeah. And then we could go to other questions. Your last question.
So I just want to know what your big takeaways are. So what did you learn from your AACR deployment that maybe you didn't know ahead of time, even after doing therapy work for so long? Like, what were your biggest takeaways?
I would say there was two. One was, especially because this was a school shooting, being careful about what you say and really be good listeners. AACR does a good job in their training of helping with what to say. But like I said, I didn't even want to ask people's names because it's not about me knowing their name. It's about what they need. It's giving 100%. Most of the time, you don't even need to say something, but just being really careful, because in everyday life, sometimes we say things and we don't realize that it might be inappropriate in this type of situation that was so sensitive. I would say that's my first takeaway, and to also incorporate that when I do evaluations and I do workshops, because someone who can be a chatty Cathy, you can see that maybe in an evaluation, and you might say, you know what, sometimes less is better. We're not here to know about your life. You're here to just give. And so I came away with that. And the second important thing I came away with was the PTSD that happens, especially in a school shooting, a siren, any loud noise. Months later, one of the janitors was in a golf cart and he ran over a water bottle or something. It made a big noise and the kids went running again. So big noises. I heard of, and I don't want to get into HIPAA, but I heard that in some of the classrooms, kids were arming themselves with certain items to protect themselves, not knowing what was going to happen. And in my head is now every time they see that particular normal household item in their life, they might be triggered to that day. So my thought is, when I'm on a normal visit at either like a hospital or a nursing home or something, I don't know what kind of traumas people have been through in their life. So it really woke me up to the issues of PTSD, how far and wide it goes. And I think I'd be more sensitive to everybody, their triggers, not even knowing their triggers. So just being really, really careful. So
yeah, definitely. I think you bring up really good points. I know there's days, you just have a bad day and you don't want to talk about it. You just want to go home and hug your dog. Like I certainly have those days where I don't want to talk about what happened. I just want to lay down and hug my dog. And so I think like really when you're on an AACR visit, your focus should be on your animal, making sure that your animal is comfortable, making sure that they are not stressed out, that they're not, that it's not too much for them, and making sure that you're advocating for them appropriately to make sure that people are interacting with them in a way that they enjoy being interacted with. And then just keeping an eye on the situation and making sure that the person is, that whatever client is visiting with your animal, that they're, not hugging too tight, or that they're not, that their emotional output isn't triggering something in your animal. So really making sure that you're being there for your pet is the primary thing that you want to do. And you don't want to inject yourself into that. Like Sandy said, you want to make sure that you're doing the best to support your animal first and foremost. And yeah, I would definitely, Deb Gibbs, you said that the handlers can be impacted by PTSD as well. I would agree. Everybody who goes on a deployment has my number, so that afterwards, if they feel that they need to talk to me, they want to talk something out, I'm always available. And we also have resources that I can pass on to people who attended a deployment. And if it's triggering for them, or they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and they need something, to ground them, we have resources available for handlers.
Yeah, so not just making sure that the dogs are okay, but you too. And out here in Santa Clarita, we had so many, not just partners, but we had, another organization that's so supportive that we were really a cohesive team, and we had so many people to talk to about, and especially after we stopped going to the schools, we felt such a loss because we missed those kids, so.
Yeah, it does become a part of the routine. And I know we've talked about that in some of our other Facebook Lives and webinars recently, with the pandemic and people stopping visiting, that, getting that lack of routine can really impact our animals. And the same thing goes for those long-term deployments, that the animal is used to going somewhere and seeing those kids every day. And then, when it stops very suddenly, it can have a negative impact on them. So making sure that you're taking good care of them and yourself.
Yeah.
I see a lot of questions about vests, and I will say that the only thing that's required for people to wear on a deployment is their AACR badge. So we do have a separate badge from your regular handler badge. You're welcome to wear Pet Partners gear. In addition to that, we do have a deployment kit that goes out to everyone who joins, which has a jacket and a shirt. And you can wear those. I think depending on the type of deployment and whether, if it's a national coordinated effort, FEMA might color code everyone based on what section they're volunteering in. So we really leave it up to the facility to determine those types of things. Yes, exactly. It's a bright yellow raincoat. Yeah, it's a big yellow windbreaker that says therapy team on the back, I believe. And a brown shirt. So I think we went with yellow and brown, but really, I would pass that information on. If a facility wanted you to wear a certain color to be, easily identifiable, I would pass that on in the logistics information. And really it varies. Yeah, cats can be credentialed too. That's right, Tina. Tina knows. Okay, so I'd like to take a break here and answer any questions that you all have. We've been talking for a while. So, if there's anything that we haven't discussed, or you have any questions, for Sandy or I, we're happy to answer them. You can type them in the chat. We have worked with the military before. At the beginning, we had a photo up of a dog named Rhett, who went on a deployment to the Unified Command Center in Denver, Colorado, where they're coordinating all of the National Guard and fire department. Yeah, there's Rhett, around the pandemic. So they're coordinating the statewide response in Colorado to the pandemic. And so we've had a deployment there. We have about 500 active teams right now. I would be very happy to have more. The program is still growing. It only started in October, so it's less than a year old. And you do have to be registered for 6 months before you can take the training. The cost for certification is $99, and that includes the deployment kit and your badge and the online coursework as well. And the minimum age of the dog to be certified, we register animals after a year old, well, dogs after a year old.
Someone was asking about their dog needs more activity. The Saugus event was actually good for younger dogs because it was, you didn't have to be too concerned that, a dog is going to hurt an elderly person with, sensitive skin or something. So some of our younger dogs did really, really well.
Yeah, and I mean, as handlers, you know the populations that your animal enjoys being around and who they're most responsive to. And you're always welcome to turn down a deployment request. I'd say I get as many people that say, no, I can't attend that say they want to go. Every deployment is different. Every situation and person is different. Every animal is different. So you're not obligated to attend a deployment if you get an invitation. It was with the chaplains. I believe the chaplains coordinated that. Most of my work with the military has been through the chaplain department's offices. We don't require animals to have the CGC because we register more than just dogs. So it wouldn't really be fair if we required an additional certification for dogs, but that we didn't have something equivalent for all of the other animals. You don't have to take the course with each animal. So let's say you have 2 dogs. You would pay $99 the first time and take the training, and then you would just need to start the application and fill in that the applicable information for the new animal in that second registration. But you wouldn't need to take the training a second time. That wouldn't be necessary. At this time, it's the training is only available to people who are actively registered with pet partners and have been registered for 6 straight months. So after 6 months, you can take this training. As far as making it available to the public, maybe if we get enough demand, we might open it up. But at this point, it's only open to currently registered handlers. But yeah, I would say even if you don't plan on going on a deployment, I think the training is really great.
I think it helps to make you feel prepared.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, everybody could use more active listening skills. As far as other deployments, aside from Saugus, we've had some deployments after natural disasters, tornadoes, wildfires. I'm sure with hurricane season coming up, I always hope we don't have some, but I anticipate that we probably will. We've had deployments after the anniversaries of someone's passing or the anniversary of some kind of unexpected event or tragedy. And we've had deployments all over the country. I've had them in many states. It can happen anywhere, unfortunately. So it really varies. Right now, we're seeing an uptick in deployments because of what's going on in the country these last few months. There's been more deployments recently than in past months. Also, the program is still getting off of the ground, but we do get a few. I get inquiries almost every week for deployments, whether or not they go all the way to deployment or whether or not that's the appropriate visit type for them. We do get a lot, and there's no cost to a facility. If a facility wants to have AACR teams come, we'll always welcome donations. We're a nonprofit, but we're not charging for these services. It's a volunteer organization, and we just want to help the communities.
There was a question about how many deployments we need to go on. You don't have to go on any.
No. Yeah.
It's all up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. If there's one in your area and you're within 90 minutes to an hour's drive, I might contact you and ask if you want to go. And if you say no, that's fine. I'll ask you the next time something comes up. And if you never go, it's okay.
There was a question of, let's see, do you notice if the approach is different depending on what type of crisis it is?
I don't know what you mean by approach, but I would say that every situation is going to be a little bit different, depending on what's happened, the mood, you know, whether the feelings are still raw or whether it's, you know, something that happened a year ago and it's an anniversary of something, and depending on how many people are there and how they were impacted, whether they're first responders or whether they are people who were displaced by something. All of those contribute to the atmosphere of the deployments. So how do you let your community know that AACR is available? There's a couple of things here. We're working on adding to the facility toolkit some resources about AACR, but what I've been saying over and over again all of the time when people contact me is really what we're looking to do is grow the program. So grow the number of teams, because, you know, if you go and tell your local fire chief, hey, there's this program at Pet Partners, you know, we can deploy, you might be the only person in your neighborhood that's credentialed. So thankfully, when the Saugus shooting happened, we had so many teams already in Sandy's area that were able to respond to the deployment. So we were able to I could confidently say, yes, we can attend that deployment and we have teams that can be there every day. But there's nothing more heartbreaking than having to say, like, no, we don't have teams in your area. I'm really sorry. You know, so what I would say to you is, you know, if you're interested, take the training. If you have already taken it, talk to your friends, talk to other handlers that you see out when you're on a visit and ask them if they're interested in taking the training. Because the more registered handlers that we have that can attend to these, the more facilities we can invite and promote, the more we can promote the program.
When we did the Saugus event, I believe there was somebody familiar with Pet Partners and her child went to Saugus. So she's the person that contacted Charisse about the AACR. And, you know, sometimes other people showed up. Yeah, I would say you need to have somebody who knows that Pet Partners has the AACR training, because I don't know of any of the other organizations that specifically have the training that we have.
Yeah, there are other organizations that do this work, and, you know, I'm just glad that it's becoming more popular, because I do think, not popular is not the right word, but I just think the more people that can be willing to help after an emergency, you know, a lot of these things are all hands on deck. And so being able to have that training in your back pocket to fall back on and being able to respond is just vital to your community when and if something happens.
And I think what we could have done is because when the shooting happened, there were several different people that they knew that they wanted pet therapy, but they didn't know who to contact. So I think if you speak up and tell, you know, contact them and say, hey, you know, we've got this program, then that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. If something happens and you are someone who works at a facility that will be coordinating it, feel free to get in touch with us. Yeah, I will. We're working on some materials for the facility toolkit so that there will be things available for you to share with facilities. But at this point, I'm really trying to focus on growing the number of teams that we have so that we can respond appropriately. But yeah, if you're in a community and you're registered and you want to tell people about the program, by all means, get in touch with me and we can talk about it. Someone asked about if the deployments always come through me. If they come through Pet Partners, you'll get a call from me or an email from me. But it's possible that if you have a pre-existing relationship with a facility, I don't know if Angie is on this live, but she has a relationship with a hospital in her city, and they were looking to have AACR teams come. So they just reached out to her directly, and that's also fine. I would ask that if you work directly with a facility and attend a deployment, that you log your visit on our website so that I can know about it and follow up if needed. You know, I like to know about them, but if you have a relationship with a facility already and they reach out to you, it's perfectly fine for you to attend a deployment. I would just stress that you should never self-deploy. That if something happens in your neighborhood and you say, well, I'm just going to get my dog and go in my car and I'm going to show up there. And I went there once, 2 years ago and they'll remember me. Like, please don't. You're not going to be in a position to help people, and it's going to be enough confusion on the scene most of the time. Like, we want to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate and that we're being welcomed into that community.
I see that Rohani asked a question about,
Sure.
do we feel like things you learn at your evaluation are helpful during the crisis? I really think so. Like the pets and the yayaba, that's one of the great things about Pet Partners is all these tools and that we have for educating and making sure that your dogs are okay, advocating for your dogs. And that was very important because, at the Saugus event, sometimes, if your dog doesn't enjoy, 10 kids all at once petting them, that's what we're all about, is making sure your dog is okay with it. And if they're not, what to do. So I think everything about the evaluation with Pet Partners is very, very helpful.
It also, I look at the qualification rating. So, we have 2 different ratings that you can earn at your evaluation. So you can be a complex rated team or a predictable rated team. And that really has to do with the environment that you can go into. So if it's a predictable setting, it needs to be somewhere where someone's going to be from the facility will be with you or nearby at all times. And that the interactions that you have will be predictable, for lack of a better word, that, it's more of a one-on-one, it's a quieter situation. You can anticipate what's going to happen. Whereas a complex setting would be an elementary school library, right? Like, there's just a lot of people or a lot of activity around you. And it might be a little bit louder. So we do look at qualification ratings when I'm trying to decide who is going to be deployed to a situation, to make sure that they're appropriate for that facility.
And I think the nice thing was when Therese asked me to head this, was that in Santa Clarita, I knew all the teams very well. So if someone wanted to go, I would say, okay, I think you do great. How would, I just want to make sure your dog would be fine with this and that. And like I said, even some of the more, quote, rowdy younger dogs do really great in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know that we mentioned that earlier, but with the Saugus High School deployment, it was ongoing for many, many days. And it's a lot easier for me in those situations, just being in Seattle. I'm not in Southern California. So it's important for me to gather the information at first for the initial deployment and to get the logistics. But once that was kicking off, I was able to pass it off to I usually try to pass the coordination element onto someone in a local group or a community partner. For Saugus High School, it was Sandy that took over for me because she was there every day and she knows the community and knows the other handlers. So a lot of times, if it's going to be a long-term deployment, I will give it off to a local leader once my part is done.
Someone asked if we had like brochures to give to police departments.
We don't quite yet. I'm really still trying to grow the program, but I hear you loud and clear that you want them. And I know that we are working on some pieces of literature and collateral for the facility toolkit. So those will eventually be available on the website. So it is, we've been on for an hour. So I do want to start to wrap things up. I really appreciate all of your questions. And Sandy, I really appreciate you being here. If anybody has any last minute questions, now's the time to get them in before we wrap up.
Let's see if Duchess wants to say hello. Duchess.
Yeah, where's Duchess at? Oh, I see her. Oh, yeah. Oh, I just want to give her a big hug.
Thank you for having me, Carissa.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everything that you guys have been doing over there. And, you are very special to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A group of people, and half of them are here asking questions too.
I know. Thank you guys for all being there. Thanks, Denise. So let's see. I'm about ready to wrap up, I think. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for your participation and all of the questions that you asked. I hope that we were able to answer as many as we could. If there's anything lingering, or, I hope that you're considering the credential. If you have any questions that weren't answered here, feel free to follow up with us. You can use the contact us form on the Pet Partners website. And thank you, Sandy, so much for agreeing to do this with me. I really appreciate you and Duchess and everything you do for Pet Partners.
I have a question.
Sure.
This will be on the Pet Partners Facebook website page.
I believe it's being recorded.
It'll probably take a couple of days for people who couldn't come but want to still see this.
Yes. Yeah. It'll be available in the videos section on the Facebook page. And then as far as getting AACR information, if you go to petpartners.org and then search maybe for AACR, might be the quickest way. If you search it in the top bar, that we have a website there with more information. And if you have any questions, just contact us. We're happy to discuss it. Thank you guys so much for joining. I really appreciate all of the participation that I saw today.
Everybody.
And I hope everyone stays safe.
Thank you.
Stay safe, wear your masks. Yeah.